Have you ever looked around the home you've lived in for decades and thought, I really need to start decluttering? But then when you start looking at everything, it suddenly feels too overwhelming to even begin? Decluttering a longtime family home sounds simple until you actually try to do it. I used to run errands and do laundry for a 78-year-old woman in Concord who said she wanted to declutter her house almost every week. But when she opened one of the boxes she had piled up over the last 25 years since her kids moved out, she became so overwhelmed that she closed it again. When someone has lived in the same home for most of their adult life, the challenge usually isn't the cleaning. Many, if not most, of the objects represent a memory, a moment in time, a person, a younger version of oneself, or a piece of life that feels important. And if you've ever thought, I really should start decluttering someday, but then immediately felt overwhelmed about where and how to begin, you're definitely not alone. I'm curious, if you've lived in your home for many years, do you ever look around and feel like there's just a lot of stuff? Maybe not junk, not things you meant to collect, just the natural accumulation of a life lived fully. If that's something you've experienced, tell me in the comments. Tell me something in the room that you can see right now that is very special to you, and tell me what meaning it holds for you. I love stories. Oh, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever it is that you are watching this. I'm Hannah. I'm a New Hampshire realtor specializing in housing transitions for older adults and the families who love them. I've seen how complicated these decisions can become. Balancing safety, independence, finances, family dynamics, and overall well-being, this channel is meant to be a trusted resource for anyone growing older in New Hampshire. I cover homes, communities, businesses, and practical research-backed strategies that help you live safely and independently. Let's get into today's topic. Today, as I'm sure you've gathered, I want to talk about something that comes up again and again when people start thinking about downsizing or preparing their home for a future move. Decluttering, but specifically why decluttering a long-time family home can feel so difficult. If you didn't already see my previous video about helping your parents move, you might want to check that out right here. In that video, I talked about how the moving process later in life is often more complicated than people expect, and clutter is only one part of that. But today, I want to slow down and talk about the decluttering side of things, because for many people, that's the part that feels the most overwhelming. Years ago, before I became a realtor, I worked for that woman that I was telling you about. I worked for her in her home that she had been living in for many decades. Her children had grown up there and they'd moved out years before. Over time, the house slowly filled with boxes in bins and piles. The closets were all full. The spare rooms were all full. The basement was full. The garage was full. The dining room was full. Every space, aside from a narrow walkway from room to room, was full of boxes and bins and piles. It wasn't junk. It was all things she had saved over the years. Photographs, papers, small keepsakes, holiday decorations, items that once belonged to family members, things that meant something. Every now and then, like I told you before, she would look around and say something like, I really need to declutter one of these days. Maybe I'll have you help me next time. But when I arrived next time, ready to help, she had changed her mind. Maybe next time. It wasn't that she didn't want to deal with it. It was that the task felt too big. Over time, I realized that there are a few reasons this happens. One of the biggest reasons is that many items carry sentimental value. When you've lived a full life in a home, it's very rare that objects are just objects. That box might contain your children's artwork or school papers, Another box might have your mother's wedding gown. And another box might be holding your high school diploma. So decluttering isn't just about organizing. It becomes a process of deciding which memories need to stay in physical form and which ones don't. That's a very different kind of decision. Another reason decluttering becomes difficult is that people worry about wasting meaningful belongings. Many older adults right now grew up in generations where throwing things away felt wrong and reckless. Things were repaired, saved, passed down. So when the time comes to declutter, people sometimes feel like they're doing something wasteful, even when the items are no longer being used. That feeling alone can make it hard to move forward. The third challenge is something very simple: volume. After several decades in the same home, there's just a lot to go through. Even if each individual decision isn't so terribly difficult, the sheer quantity of decisions can feel debilitating. And when people look at the entire house all at once, their brain basically says, no, this is too much. So nothing happens. That's where having the right kind of help can make a huge difference. One of the reasons I chose to pursue designation as a seniors real estate specialist and certified relocation and transition specialist is because I realized that many families need help creating and implementing a plan. It's not just selling a house for you, but actually working alongside you through the transition, step by step. Sometimes the first step is simply organizing the process into manageable pieces. Instead of looking at the whole house, we might start with one small area. One drawer today, one shelf tomorrow, one box if you're feeling like that shelf wasn't too much, and we gradually build momentum from there. Another thing I often suggest is creating ways to preserve memories without needing to keep every physical item. Sometimes that means taking photos of meaningful objects. Sometimes it means recording videos where you tell the story behind a particular item. Those memories can be saved and shared with family without needing to fill an entire home with belongings. At the same time, we focus on identifying what really matters, the truly irreplaceable things, family heirlooms, items that someone uses regularly in daily life, the things that genuinely contribute to comfort and independence. Those are the items that deserve a place in the next chapter. Once that process is underway, the particular practical side becomes easier. We talk about things like inviting your family over to choose items that they want to keep, having yard sales, coordinating with estate sale companies, or arranging donation pickups. We can create a timeline so the work happens gradually rather than all at once. And just as importantly, we can make sure the entire family understands the plan and feels included in the process. Because housing transitions later in life are rarely just about the house. They're about the people who made that house a home. If you've ever tried or succeeded at decluttering after many years in the same home, what part felt the most difficult? Was it the memories, the volume of items, or just knowing where to start? Tell me in the comments. I read every comment, and I'd love to hear your experience. If you ever find yourself thinking about downsizing or simply wanting to make your home easier to manage, having someone helping you create a plan can make the entire process feel much less overwhelming. And if you're in New Hampshire and want to talk about what that process might look like for your situation, you're always welcome to reach out. My phone number is 603-573-6969. You can also find additional information and resources linked in the description below. In the next video, we're going to talk about something closely connected to this topic. We'll explore what downsizing actually looks like for many older adults and why it doesn't always mean what people assume it means. I'll see you next time.